So I started developing my team as leaders, and that had probably the biggest impact on the business. I said, we're setting goals today. This is the number one goal. We're going to be franchise of the year at the end of the year.
Tell us the difference between manager and leader.
Managers manage the business and they manage the processes. Leaders lead the people. When somebody books a job, the first thing you want to do is do a welcome call. Price is only an issue in the absence of value, and it's all about establishing value. Yeah, the biggest three that, value keys that are important to our customers are time, space, and effort.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Marketing Without Rules, the show where we inspire business owners by bringing on guests who exemplify the hunter mindset. They make moves, they color outside the lines, and they have found creative ways to channel the attention of their community into currency. This show is sponsored by Blue Crocus Solutions, a web design and SEO agency focused on helping home service companies. I am your host, Lewis Vandervalk, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with Kevin Hess. Kevin is a founder of Survivor Junk Removal, a former cancer survivor, hence the name of the business, and a former standout team member at 1-800-GOT-JUNK. He was influential in helping take a franchise location from 800,000 up to 9 million over the course of his stint there. And so he's got a ton of hands-on experience from the trenches of junk removal. Kevin brings a rare blend of corporate insight and entrepreneurial grit, and he's built Survivor Junk Removal from the ground up with a relentless focus on world-class customer service, fair pricing, and building a team culture that works. He's also at least a 2-time book author, and he has imparted a lot of his knowledge through trainings where he'll fly out or he'll do virtual trainings with people to help them build their culture in their training. So Kevin, welcome to the show. Awesome to be chatting with you.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. It's been a while since we've spoken.
It has, yeah. So Kevin actually jumped on my previous podcast, and then we interacted through his training. So he did some training. I jumped in that, and then he was gracious enough to gift me the ability to share that training with our clients, and we built his website in exchange. So it's been fun to watch you on the B2C side and just learn from you and the stories and whatnot that you've gleaned from 1-800-JUNK. So maybe just give people a quick background for those that don't know you. I said a bit in the intro, but just a quick background on why they should even listen to what you're about to say or what we're going to chat about today.
All right. Well, like you mentioned before, I was with 1-800-GOT-JUNK for about 10 and a half years. When I started there, it was a small location in Atlanta, one of the 3 Atlanta locations. And, while I was there, $800,000 a year. I mean, it's nothing to sneeze at. It's, it was pretty decent, but it was still small in size. They only had about 4 trucks and a couple routes. For me, it was, going in there as an operations manager, it was a fairly easy job, for coming from my background. And, over the years, it just was kind of a slow creep. We thought we were doing great. The first 7-8 years, that first 7 years, we went up from that 800,000 to 1.5 million, and we thought we were doing great. And, we were really rocking and rolling. We were doing year over year great numbers and everything. And then, like you mentioned before, everything kind of changed for me after I was diagnosed with cancer, and my whole entire mindset changed for me. And not only that, a lot of it had to do with one of the vice presidents. He used to be in our area, and he used to be like the regional operations manager, but he had been promoted up to vice president. And during my recovery, he had reached out to me, and we were kind of talking, and then I told him that I was looking, something had to change. It's something, the thought of, after having cancer, and the thought of, going away, without having that legacy behind me, it was, a little scary. And so I asked for his advice, and I asked him to give me some honest, candid feedback. And he told me, Kevin, you're probably one of the best managers that we have in the entire system. But my honest feedback to you is you're not a great leader. And to me, I thought that was kind of weird because, I'd been in management for over 30 years, and really I didn't know the difference between being a manager and being a leader. So that kind of stuck with me. And during my recovery, I started, just diving into leadership and finding out what leadership really meant. So as I, went back to work, I started developing myself as a leader, and I saw things start to change with the business. retention level with the employees were better. They were just more motivated. And, we were doing great that year. We finished off, we jumped up from that 1.5 to 2.5 million. I'm like, whoa, that's a huge increase. A whole $1 million in a year is a huge increase. And the more I just started developing myself, that next year we went up to 3.5. And, it felt great because it felt like I found my purpose. And it felt really, really good. And then the more I thought about that, I realized that if I found my purpose and I feel this way and I'm, really, really impacting my own life, what if I do the same for my employees? What if I start developing them as leaders, helping them find their purpose, and impacting their lives and giving them forward momentum so that they're not just workers for a junk removal company, but they have some kind of forward momentum, some kind of career path as well. So I started developing my team as leaders, and that had probably the biggest impact on the business. From there, we went that 3.5, we jumped all the way up to 6 million. And then after that, that's when I got really, really intentional and really started placing high goals. And, I wanted to finish off that year. This was 2022, January 2nd, 2022. I walked in, I had an all hands meeting with all the employees. I had them all come in. We had a nice big breakfast and I started writing on the board, FOTY 22, Franchise of the Year 2022. I said, we're setting goals today. This is the number one goal. We're going to be Franchise of the Year at the end of the year. We're also going to be ranked number one top performer in all of 1-800-GOT-JUNK. We're talking about 175 franchises. And the third one is I'm going to move 3 to 5 people forward, given that, create opportunities for them to move forward in the business. And that's the one that really got everybody's attention. So, that my area director, like, okay, those are great BHAGs. Those are good, big, hairy, audacious goals. I said, no, that is the goal. And, fast forward to the end of the year, ranked number one out of all of 1-800-GOT-JUNK, top performer. We got the Franchise of the Year, and I had maybe 7 or 8 people move forward to, other locations as trainers, operations managers. I had a few go to general managers. It's just in other locations, Jacksonville, Florida, Naples, Florida, 2 in Los Angeles. God, it was just sending them all over the country. I sent trainers and operations manager to the other Atlanta locations to help them out to get to where we were at. So, that impact, I had this empty wall in the office, I started calling that the legacy wall. And I started hanging up pictures of everybody that moved forward. The very first guy I had, he went to, where was it? He went out to Michigan, actually. And that's what started the whole deal. And right off the bat. And it was a lot of fun to see these people moving forward. And everybody kept telling me, okay, you're moving your best people forward and out into other businesses. How are you going to hit these goals? How are you going to get Franchise of the Year? How are you going to be top performer when your best people are leaving for other locations? Because I have an army of leaders right behind them. Everyone that's coming, everybody's dying to take their place because they want to move forward. They want that opportunity created. They want to be leaders in this business. So that had a huge impact on the business. And like I said, that's why we finished that year at $9 million.
Wow, that's as someone who's going, I think I'm going to get you to back up and tell us the difference between manager and leader. I think I know, or I'm starting to understand, but I'd love for you to break that out in really simple terms for people.
Managers manage the business and they manage the processes. Leaders lead the people. It's as simple as that. You're leading people, you're helping. A leader is somebody, I think it was John Maxwell. He said that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And that's what it is, influencing other people, helping change their lives. Being a leader is being in servitude of others. And I took that mindset really seriously. I spent a lot of my time doing one-on-ones with my employees, learning everything about them, finding out where they wanted to be, professionally, personally. I helped them set goals to reach where they wanted to be personally, professionally. And, I help them develop themselves. I help them become leaders to help develop other people that are coming in. We had a lot of tiers of different people, and I had a lot of people. The first thing they did in the morning was they walked up to our KPI board and looked at the KPIs, and I had a line going across the board. Everybody who was, had hit the goals of the numbers, and we had very challenging KPIs because we wanted it to be hard for people. We wanted it to be challenged, because we wanted them to grow. And if their name was above the line, their numbers were in green. If they were below the line, their numbers were in red. And it wasn't to shame them. It was to help motivate them. And not only that, it was to help motivate the other leaders where they'd walk in, their name is above the line. They walk in and it's like, hey, pair me up with that guy today because I want to help him get above the line. I want to help him get his numbers up. I'm strong in this, he's weak at that. That's where those intentional pairings happened to help develop people. It wasn't just putting the same people together all the time or just doing it randomly. Everything was intentional. When every single pairing that we did every single day, whether we had, 10 routes going out or 15 or 18 routes going out, every single one of those pairings were intentional in order to develop people.
I love that. I'm going to get into what those, what some of those KPIs were, but I want to kind of bring this to people's attention that this is a marketing podcast, Marketing Without Rules. We want you to get out there and do things that bring in more business, bring in more jobs and all of that. But it's a people business too. Every business that's more than just you as the owner out there being scrappy and getting stuff done involves you interacting with people and to whatever extent you are managing or leading those people. So it's very applicable to every business, to my business as an agency, to Kevin's business as a junk removal business, to the plumber, to the tree service guy. There are people in your team and we need to lead them and we need to lead ourselves to lead them. So let's talk about KPIs. And then the next thing we'll lead into is whether you are the type of person that gets up there and gives really aggressive rah-rah speeches or not. Let's talk about the KPIs first, but I want to get into the next part after.
Okay. Well, all the KPIs, 1-800-GOT-JUNK had their own set of KPIs that they followed and everything else, but I did a really deep dive into a lot of them, and I started tracking effort-based KPIs. Where a lot of the KPIs they wanted us to track, I felt like they were more for operations, for the business. I wanted performance-based, effort-based KPIs. So the obvious one was AJS. We had tracked, that was probably our number one KPI, and a lot of junk removal
average job size for the
average job size. Yes. But, we did that for a while, but then, I had a lot of feedback from my guys, and a lot of those numbers get skewed when you do really big commercial jobs, so it's easy to get those numbers higher when you have those big commercial jobs. So it didn't seem fair. So we took a deep dive into it and realized something, and something I talk about this a lot with other junk removal companies because nobody else does it. We focused, our most important KPI was residential average job size. Just doing the average, doing 60%, 66% of our full load rate. That was our average job size. It's hard to hit. It was very challenging, but we were hitting it on a regular basis as a team, but to me, that was the biggest effort-based KPI that we had. Different things that we tracked in the background were, revenue per hour, revenue per mile, and everything else. Like I said, those are ones that are important to 1-800-GOT-JUNK, but to me, that was more important to operations, not my team. Mm-hmm. So we tracked things like Google reviews, the return rate. If they did, 10 jobs and they got 5 reviews, that's 50% return rate, and that's great. So we tracked that. We tracked conversion rate, on-site conversion, once they got their foot in the door. The cancellation rate in total, wasn't as important to me as the on-site conversion, because our whole purpose was to get our foot in the door and get into the customers and really sell that job. So that's where we track that on-site conversion. And believe it or not, would you believe if I told you that we averaged 95 to 96% closing every on-site job that we put our foot in?
I would, because I know you now, but that's crazy. Yeah. Very high.
95 to, and the goal for 1-800-GOT-JUNK was about 78 to 80%. That was the goal. And, some people could hit it, some people couldn't, but that was the actual goal that they thought was pretty good, but we were hitting consecutively 95 to 96%.
That's really high once you get in the job. And then, the rest of the stuff is, making sure operations are there so that people don't cancel and they, you get to them quick enough and all of that. Crazy. What, give me an example of, you talked about talking to your team members and finding out what they're looking for, but give me an example of, you coming in the morning, you're talking to your team as a whole. What are you doing to consistently hold that standard through conversation with them?
Well, we had a morning huddle every single single day. It was important. It was non-negotiable. We had a morning huddle. Everybody'd come in. We'd have a quick huddle. We'd talk about the numbers from the previous day. If we hit our goals, we went through every single number. If we didn't hit the goals, what could have we done to hit it? And then we'd set, I'd have the team set the goal for the day. We'd had a formula. We knew how many jobs we had that day. We knew what our percentage was for, same day add-ons. And from there, we set a goal of how much revenue we'd going to bring in that day as a team. And, then we would go into maybe some type of training, whether it be safety training, role plays. We do a lot of those. And the funny thing is, after a while, my voice became stale in those meetings. And the funniest thing happened to me. One day I had a bad cold, had no voice at all. So I asked one of my guys, I said, "Can you run the meeting this morning? I can't talk." He's like, "Yeah, sure. That's great." So he got up there and he ran that meeting, and the confidence that he had, because I just empowered him to run this meeting, was huge. The team looked at him like a role model, like, this guy's a leader. I want to be him. Mm-hmm. He had so much confidence. He came back with the best day. At the end of the day, he came back with the best day he's ever had, because he has so much confidence going through. And that's why it's empower your team when you're a leader, because empowering them, just like the word says, it empowers them and they feel powerful, confident. And that confidence goes out into everything that they do from then on. That's what helped them want to be that leader, because they enjoyed it and it felt different to them. No other business they had ever worked at let them run meetings, so from then on, I didn't run any of the morning huddles. I might say something every once in a while, but because my voice was no longer stale, when I did speak, it had more impact.
How did you know when your voice was going stale?
Just because everybody, they're in the morning just laying back, listening and just going through the motion, where it's just hearing the same person over and over every single day, and it just got boring.
Yeah.
But having somebody different up there every single day, from the higher to the senior guys to guys that had been there for a couple months, imagine being at a job for a month and then, running a meeting. That felt important to them. So, and the whole team really was engaged, and they got people, setting their own goals for the day. It just helped team be engaged and created a lot of buy-in.
Yeah, 25K. What were you doing? 25 to 30K per day. This was goal at that last year.
God, we were hitting probably between 50 to 70.
Yeah. Okay.
A lot. It's funny because a lot of businesses, when they're in junk removal, everybody's dream, they want to hit that $1 million mark. That's their dream, right? There's a few of them that actually have hit that $1 million mark, but none of them have ever hit that $1 million mark in a month.
No,
we did that 2 months in a row.
That's wild.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine that?
Yeah.
$1 million in 1 month.
That's a lot of movement.
It's a lot of moving parts in there, and it wouldn't have been able to happen if it wasn't for an army of leaders in there.
Yeah, everybody's got to be on their A game. That's awesome. Thanks for going through that. I'm going to switch a little bit because I really, really like how you approach from the time that someone schedules their quote or schedules, an onsite to the whole trip to showing up at the front door. Could you walk people through that and just kind of talk to them about, what that looks like and what it's feeling like as a customer? Maybe I'll chirp in a little bit too, because it's still fresh to me. You've done this so many times, but when I heard it was just so cool. If you could walk people through that.
Well, I mean, when somebody books a job, the first thing you want to do is do a welcome call, call them, just welcome. Hey, thank you for, booking with us. And, just want to introduce myself. If you need anything from now until the time you're scheduled, feel free to reach out to me. And that also helps a lot with those customers that book out maybe a week or two out, because if I have no interaction with them, maybe just an automated message or something, hey, thanks for booking, they might start looking at other junk removal companies, and until then, just find the best quote for them. But when an actual person reaches out to them and introduces themselves, they feel a little special, and and you start building that rapport process with them. So, when you're a solo operator or a small business, a lot of the times it's you that's going to end up being on that job. So once you finally put your foot in the door, they feel like they already know you and they already trust you because you already started that rapport process with them. So, and then fast forward to the day we're going out to the job, the truck teams always do a call ahead. To me, those call aheads are really important. It's basically just introducing themselves. You call them 15 to 30 minutes before their promise window. You introduce yourself, make sure you, just little things like, hey, this is Kevin from Survivor Junk Removal. I'm just calling to confirm your appointment today between this time and this time. And then just little things like, I know you have this and this going out today. I just wanted to let you know that we are fully licensed and insured and we can go anywhere in your home. Then I start listing off places like the basement, the garage, crawl space, attic, backyard, shed. Shed is my favorite because people always forget about all the stuff they have in their shed. But to me, this is what I call FMJ. It's trying to find more junk, before I get on site, and kind of plants the seed in there, because a lot of times what they're working on is just a project, especially the single items. If you're in junk removal, you understand that a lot of people hate those single items, just a sofa or just a mattress. To me, those are challenges because I know that 99% of the time they have more junk. This is just a project they're working on. That's all they're thinking about. So if they have a sofa, like, oh, you have a sofa today, just letting you know, we're fully licensed and go anywhere in your home. And I start listing off those places. They start turning the gears. So when we finally show up, they're already thinking about other junk in their house. We could be like, oh yeah, why, I know you're just picking up a sofa today, but while you're here, my husband's been procrastinating about cleaning out the basement for the past like 9-10 months. Is there any way you could take a look at it while you're here? Absolutely. So, I might go in there for a sofa and then walk out of there with a truck and a half of basement junk, so it gets those gears turning before you even show up on site. And, I'll finish that conversation off. I'll ask him where's the most, convenient place for us to park, because it shows that we're being considerate about their property, just little things like that. But then what I'll do is I'll ask them, hey, I know it's early and everything else. We're going to stop and fuel up before we go out there. You want us to grab you a coffee on the way? And most of the time they say no, but just the fact that somebody did that, carpet cleaners, gutter cleaners, contractors, they're not going to ask to bring you coffee. It's the little things like that starts building that trust and that rapport with the customer and building that relationship. On a hot day like today, we're 96 degrees out today. Hey, I'm on my way. I'm going to stop and get fuel before we go there. You want me to grab you a cold water? I know it's really hot outside and you've probably been out there working in the garage trying to get that stuff ready. Just that being considerate like that is just, it's a wow moment for them.
Yeah, $1 or $2 for a water or a coffee goes a long ways. I remember the first time you told me that, it was just like, man, that is the bee's knees right there. And it works for anybody. Kevin's talking specifically from his experience in junk removal. Yeah, it works for anybody.
I told that to a guy out in I think it's in the Boston area, but he texted me. He's like, hey, I took your advice and I offered to get him a coffee on the way. They said yes. What do I do? I'm like, get him a damn coffee.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, this is junk removal specifically, but plumbing, anybody that's doing to someone's house, plumbing.
Yeah. Any home service, they're not used to that, type of wow service. With most home services, it's all about being transactional. And that's the problem. And that's why a lot of people, miss out on closing those jobs, is because they are going straight transactional and not actually building that relationship with the customer. Yeah. And that's the important part, whether it be in junk removal, carpet cleaning, gutter cleaning, it doesn't matter. Any home services, building that relationship, because you can spend thousands and thousands of dollars on marketing and advertising, but the real bread and butter is always going to be those repeat customers and those referrals, referring to their friends, their family, their coworkers.
Can you share any examples from you or from anybody that you've taught where they've implemented it and seen a change?
Implemented what?
Implemented, any part of it, but any one of those little touch points along the way, and they've noticed a change in the number of jobs that they book, or just overall.
Overall, to them, it's it starts that whole rapport building process, and that in itself helps you get your foot in the door. And it's night and day from when you show up. A lot of people in home services, somebody shows up, they're like, okay, what are they going to do? They're going to charge me a lot of money. They're thinking about all the money that they're going to have to pay. Just give it to me, get it over with, rip the Band-Aid off. Whereas when you show up, you already started building that rapport and that relationship with the customer. They're actually excited to see you. They're actually, you start that rapport with them, and it builds trust. And people buy from people they trust. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And, if I'm walking in there, hey, how you doing? I'm Kevin. Where's your junk? There's no trust there. They're like, all right, well,
They're on guard from the minute you walk.
they're on guard. Exactly. And, it could be very well be that, I might get the job just because they're desperate. They have to get rid of it and I'm already there. Sometimes they're going to say no. They're going to make some kind of excuse. I have to talk to my wife, or, I'm still calling other people, or, sometimes they'll tell you straight up, that's just too much money. Price is only an issue in the absence of value. And it's all about establishing value and about you and your service.
You talk about that a lot. Can you go deeper on that? So I've come there, or you've come, you're going to serve me. And I'm like, man, Kevin, that's crazy. Like,
yeah,
I have no idea why.
When I show up, like I said, I'm not going in there and being straight transactional. I'm going in there asking about how your day's going. I'm going to, be observant, look for their interest. Maybe they have a beautiful home and, maybe it's the wife and she's the one that's decorating, and start talking about how beautiful the home is. That starts building that rapport with them, and just that small talk. Maybe you see they're into sports. I'll start talking about sports with them. The best is their little fur babies, their pets. That's always a great conversation starter. But I'll talk to them until they bring up the junk. I won't bring up junk until they do. But, that's the relational rapport. Then you get into the relevant rapport, finding out why they're getting rid of the junk. That's the important part. If I can find out why they're getting rid of the junk, I can find those value keys, and then I can cater a solution to them. They have a specific challenge. I'm going to cater a specific solution to them. Maybe they have a bedroom that's just been accumulating. They've been storing stuff in, and the wife is due to have a baby in like 2 weeks. The guy's been procrastinating about getting that room cleaned out, painting the walls, putting a crib in and everything else. And he's like, man, I've been procrastinating. We're down to the wire. Okay, now I have two different value keys. I know time is an issue. That's one of his challenge. And he needs his space back. So now I'm catering my solution. I'm not just giving him a price. Okay, it's going to cost this much to do it, and then just sit back and wait for his answer, because all he's thinking about is the price at that point. But if I cater the solution is like, okay, it's going to be this much volume. It's going to cost this much. We're going to get this whole space cleared out. It's going to take us 30 minutes. And by the time your wife gets home, you're going to already have started painting and building that crib, and she's going to be so thankful to you. So now he's thinking about the value instead of the price. And he's like, hell yeah, let's do it.
What are some other, that's a solid key there. What I heard there, and what I've heard you teach on and seen you teach on, is you're talking about, this is what he needs. And I've asked him the questions to get to know him. He's comfortable. He's letting down his guard a little bit. We're talking about, oh, you guys are having a baby. That's exciting. What does it do? And then you're starting to pull those keys out. What are some other keys? Time,
the biggest three that, value keys that are important to their customers are time, space, and effort. They have time, they have busy lives, kids, soccer practice, piano lessons, bake sales, full-time jobs, just they don't have time to do it themselves. Their weekend is spent, running kids, running errands, getting groceries. It's just they don't have the time to do it. Maybe they need their space back. Maybe the garage is full and the wife just got a brand new car and wants to start parking in the garage, but all that stuff's in there. Or maybe the basement is full of, they've been storing stuff, and brother-in-law is down on his luck, got divorced and needs a place to stay. You clean out the space for them and you give them their space back. Or effort, maybe it's a single mother or an elderly couple and they have big heavy furniture. Okay, well, we got two strong guys here to take care of you. So finding out if it's time, space, or effort, and then establishing the value and cater a solution to that challenge is what they're looking for. It kind of reminds them of why they called you to begin with. They deep in their heart, they know they called you out there to get their space back, but you just reminded them of that, because they can't think of anything else once you give them a price, and you just sit there and pause and wait for a yes or no.
You're just driving home exactly what it was that they wanted.
It's just reminding them, hey, you called me out here to get your space back, and I'm going to get you your space back. Have this all cleaned out for you. I'm going to sweep the whole area when I'm done. Sometimes I'll even joke when I'm cleaning out a garage. I'm like, okay, so what are you going to do with this space? That's a good place to hang up a disco ball, or put a bar over the corner. I'll just joke around with them but it kind of paints that picture to them, well, what they can do with that space now that they have it.
That's huge. That's so insightful. And I say this at the end, guys, and I'm going to say it now. Go back and implement a couple of those things. Whatever home service business you're in, implement a couple and let us know how it worked for you. Kevin, I'm going to do a little bit of a fire round now. What is your favorite tool in the truck right now?
My favorite tool in the truck? It's always got to be the 4-wheel dolly. I just love that thing because, a lot of times, or even my hand truck. But I recently got rid of my wheelbarrow and got this big utility wagon that makes it really, really easy. And it's the sides fold down, the back and front fold down, so it can be a flat cart. It's very rare. I did a huge demolition construction debris job the other day. It was all the way in the backyard. It was a long walk. And, in a wheelbarrow, that would have been small amounts each time. But this thing, I was able to stack really high, put a bungee over it and wheeled it. It was 109-degree heat index outside, and it just made it a lot quicker, easier with these big wheels on it. That's suddenly becoming my favorite tool in my arsenal. I had just gotten it a couple months ago, and I haven't been able to use it yet. And that last Friday I used it, and it made my life so much easier.
You're a bad man working out there in that 109 degrees heat. What's the best way to earn a 5-star review without saying, please leave us a review?
Plant the seed. The first thing I do is on the back of my price sheet, I have this simple little thing with some pictures on it. Just kind of, I'll kind of show you an example here. It kind of explains my service very simply for people to understand, before I start going into prices and stuff. It's just a little piece of paper with some icons on it, right?
That's great. I love it.
And I let them know, because I ask them, have you ever used a service like ours before? And it's usually no. So I'll explain to them. So basically, I'll point them out as I go. I just walk through, take a look at everything you have, give you a thorough evaluation, give you a free estimate on the spot. If you're good with that, I can get started as early as today. And if at any time I'm not giving you a 5-star service, just tap me on the shoulder and let me know. So I planted that seed so that when I'm done, they know that there's going to be a Google review involved.
Yeah.
So that seed is already planted, and they're expecting good service at that point. And when they get it, they're really happy to give it.
Yeah.
After I collect payment, I hope I gave you a 5-star service today. Oh, absolutely. Do you have a link to your Google reviews?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, you're planting the seed all along, right from the start. You're giving them a 5-star service when you're calling them in advance, when you're calling them on the way, when you're, showing up. That's huge. The other thing I noticed there is, and this is true for any home service company, we've had to employ a few over the years. We've got 4 kids. It's crazy. I can't do everything that I used to around the house and run a business. And so, let's say we've got cleaners in, or a plumber, or, someone to come take care of stuff around the house. Or my wife has not, in some cases, used those services. And so she's not really sure how it all goes. Sometimes I'm not sure how it goes, what their plan is, what the specific company does for that specific type of service. And so you said there, and lay out exactly how it's going to go. Icon by icon on the back of your paper, you lay it out. They have the comfort now, okay, all right, I can go do this thing while he's working, or I can, I don't have to stick around for 3 hours. They're not going to take that long. You've laid it out for them. They know what's going to happen. That's a big unlock that I think every business could use from someone telling you. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll give you an example of that. I had my back deck was a really small deck, and it was falling apart, and I needed somebody to come in and build a new deck, just rebuild it. And then I had built a smaller deck at the bottom, and I just wanted to redo that deck and put some stairs down to that other little deck that I had built. And that's it. I had 2 guys come in to give me an estimate on it. Are like, all right, so it's going to cost this much. I'm like, whew, that's really expensive. Then I had the 3rd guy come in, and he said, well, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to build it. I'm going to put it out this far. I'm going to build stairs down to another deck. I'm going to get rid of that deck that you built. It's a piece of crap. We're going to do it, and we're going to extend this out to your pool. Man, wouldn't that look nice? Imagine this going straight to your above ground pool and just kind of halfway wrapping around it, and then having stairs going down where you can put your grills down there and everything else. I mean, he's painting this whole picture, and I'm visualizing the whole thing. And I'm like, yeah, I like that. He painted this picture, and it ended, this is something that's going to be double the price of what I already had budgeted. And I was like, yes, do it. Yeah. Because he painted that picture for me, and I was able to visualize, he knew my challenge, and, he knew that, I wanted something to enjoy my backyard and to enjoy my, I had just put up this above ground pool, and it was basically going to be stairs going down to this deck and then stairs going up to the the pool, and but he just gave me this whole vivid picture of what it could be, and to me that was everything. And being in this business, I know exactly what that meant, and just that level of service and what painted that picture for me was, I got excited to do it, and I got excited to pay double the money, because I saw the value in it, because he painted this beautiful picture for me.
That's exciting. Yeah, it's people just don't know what they need sometimes. And that's not a license to go oversell them. But if you can paint a picture and let them know what's possible, then it's like, oh, that is actually what I want. I do want that deck. That's cool. What is your dream collaboration or brand partnership for survival junk removal?
That's a good question. I've done some really cool collaborations recently. I've done some partnership with our county chamber of commerce, and I've met some great people in there. I've become friends with city councilmen that have come up to me while I was at a pizza place, just having a beer, waiting for my pizza to be made, and had a city councilman come up to me and just hey, you're the junk guy. And we just started talking, and he bought me another beer, and we just hung out and everything else. But I like collaborating with other small businesses in my county. I'm in a small town surrounded by other small towns, and that collaboration process in networking, just I met she's the head of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce for the entire state of Georgia. And, we started talking about leadership, and, and I just happened to have in my briefcase, I had one of my books, and I gave it to her, and she loved it. She started talking about it to other people. And next thing you know, I'm getting a phone call from one of our neighboring cities. The actual city themselves asked me to be a guest speaker at a leadership conference they're having this October, and for the city, and, invited me to do that. It's opened a lot of doors. The networking has opened me a lot of doors that I never thought was possible. And the collaboration with just the community has just been incredible. So, I'm hitting that dream collaboration like all the time, but that's just locally. But as far as everything else that I'm doing, with the junk evolution, I'm collaborating with like people all across the country right now, and different junk removal companies, big ones, small ones. I actually just was talking to recently about doing some training. Is probably, I won't mention the name, but they're probably one of the largest non-franchise junk removal companies in the country.
That's cool.
And that would be a great collaboration for me. And, outside of just my local junk removal company.
That's exciting. What is one thing that every junk removal business should stop doing today?
Is being transactional. That to me, that's my biggest pet peeve. Whenever I talk to a junk removal company or I start to do my training, the first thing I do is role play their first interaction with a customer. And it's always the same thing. Hey, how you doing? I'm Lewis. Where's your junk at? That right there to me is the biggest fail. You have a chance, you might do it, you might not do it. But, if you're starting off straight transactional, I don't want to offend any contractors in here, but, a lot of times people have that contractor mindset. In junk removal, a lot of people probably come from that contractor background. And the whole you have to know your worth thing, to me, I'm sorry if this offends anybody, but to me, that's complete BS.
Yeah.
You may know your worth, but your customer doesn't. You have to earn your worth. You have to show them your worth for them to know your worth. So, so people's egos get in the way. It's always going to be their biggest enemy. And that's why a lot of small home businesses fail. I actually have a good friend of mine from high school that's getting ready to start a home business, and I'm going to meet with him. I might actually drive up to North Carolina just to hang out with him and help him, because that's where a lot of home businesses fail. It's just that their ego gets in the way, and that whole, I don't move my truck for under $1,000, or, I don't travel outside of my, 5-mile radius or stuff like that. To me, that's fostering a culture of excuses. And I think that their ego is always going to be their biggest enemy. And I think people should really think about that, because any of the junk removal companies or home-based businesses out there, the ones that are making 7 figures already, they've put their egos away. They're still hungry to learn. They realize they don't know anything. They know that what got them here will not get them there. And they're ready to evolve in order to scale. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. It's their ego is going to keep them plateaued forever.
It's brutal. Yeah. That's every business, agency, home service, you name it.
Yeah.
Huge. We talked a bit about your books at the beginning. Talk about your books and junk evolution. You've got 2 books out now. I see one of them there behind you. The other one I think is cut off on the screen. We might see it here.
Yeah, no, my first book, is Leading with Purpose, Inspiring Growth Culture and Building a Visionary Team. That was my first, that's something that I wanted to create for my legacy is, I always wanted to write a book. And, as much as I've learned about leadership, I wanted to put it in a book that would help other people and really narrow it down. No fluff, straight to business. Well, when I first released that, and I had posted it in one of the Facebook groups, and the first thing that somebody commented on was, what does this have to do with junk removal? I'm like, well, technically everything, if you want to, grow your business and you want to be a good leader and everything else. But I kind of thought about what he had to say, and I was doing something and I had Googled the word leadership and I posted images. And what I saw was people in suits and ties sitting in boardrooms or conference tables, sitting at a desk. So I can kind of understand why a lot of people in the blue collar industry don't think about leadership. It doesn't seem relevant to them. And that really kind of hit home to me because they are missing out on what leadership can do for their business. So that's when I came out and I started writing my second book, which is Leading with Grit. It's purpose-driven leadership in a blue collar world. And it's really easy to read, no fluff, no BS, straight to business, so that any blue collar person can understand how to utilize leadership in their business. Yeah. And I wanted it to be, non-corporate, you just blue collar guy to blue collar guy type deal so that it's easy to understand.
I love it. Well, I've been, privileged to be on the sidelines as I watch you communicate with people in the groups. Been privileged to watch your training, chat with people that have gone through your training. You're changing lives. You're leaving that legacy, that you talked about at the beginning as the whole reason you got started on your journey with, really diving into being a leader, not a manager. And you've inspired a lot of people. You've changed a lot of people's lives. So appreciate you coming on here, Kevin. Appreciate you sharing that. And where can people find the books aside from Amazon? Do you have them listed anywhere else or just go to Amazon?
Yeah, I have them on my website, thejunkevolution.com. I have that. I started that to help and give support to other people that, and it's more than just junk removal as well. It can help a lot of home services. I have a pro tips blog that every time I see somebody post a question that they're struggling with, I'll write a blog about it. I've got about 60 blogs right now, 60 plus blogs. Besides that, I have different documents that people can use, different trainings. I have my leadership books. I have different forms that they can utilize for free. I have a Chat GPT playbook that, people can utilize to help run their business. I've kind of done a lot of research, but I also have my training programs. Besides, when we first spoke, we were talking about my onsite experience training where I was doing it live with people and everything else. I actually evolved that and created one that people can utilize to train their team.
Very cool.
So that it's just, it's not just a one-on-one, Google Meets call, and it's something that they can use for themselves as a solo entrepreneur, or they can use it to train their actual teams, and then, I saw a lot of people that have, bigger businesses. They have operations managers. They can't figure out how to, structure that position. So I created an operations manager training as well that really dives deep in that, creating, standard operating procedures for people. And, I'm trying to get on that higher end, trying to cover all bases and give resources to, whatever tier they're on, whether it be beginning, whether mid-sized junk removal company, large size, I'm trying to get something for everybody to help and get that resources all in one place for them.
Well, you've gone from, mid-size to, mid upper end of what most people are at to, well above what most people are at. So you bring the experience.
Yeah.
Guys and girls, Kevin dropped a lot of nuggets in here, whether you're in junk removal, whether you're in just general home service, anybody that's going to talk to people, sell them a service, sell them on the value of that service before they even, start selling the service. There's a lot of value in here, even if it's just a coffee run on the way to a job, even if it's just a call. A lot of nuggets. Kevin, appreciate you coming on the show. And guys and girls, we will see you on the next one. Stay hungry.